It is Wednesday, July 13th, and you were listening to another 5 minute morning edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I am Blair Angulo, joined by Brian Dohn, National Recruiting Analyst for 24/7 Sports, and we are here to break down the latest in the recruitment of five-star offensive tackle Samson Okunlola. Brian, you had an update this week outlining the possible next steps for the top uncommitted offensive lineman in the country.
Yeah, I spoke with him and he was talking about, look, he made some visits and he's got, Oregon, Alabama, Miami, Michigan State are the ones really standing out and the most contact. And he spoke about maybe getting this thing done during the summer, which would be kind of a change. Well, not kind of, it would be a change of plans for him. Just he had always maintained he would make probably 3 visits in June, 3 officials, which he did, and then probably make 2 more in the fall. And while that could still happen, the idea that, he could be tiring of this process after spending so much time on the road. And like you mentioned, Blair, as the top uncommitted offensive lineman, there's a lot of attention on him. So he may get it done at some point. He talked about maybe late July, maybe early August. Remember, he starts his season late up in Massachusetts. So there's plenty of time for him to deal with recruiting before training camp.
He has a lot of the leverage right now. Francis Mauigoa is off the board. Caden Proctor is off the board. Those recently committed. And now Samson Okunlola has a lot of that leverage. He has a lot of that ability now to potentially wait things out. You've talked to us on this podcast before about how in-season visits are a bit difficult for him because he does play his high school games on Saturdays. How much of that is a role in his thought process now?
No, I just think he's tired of the recruiting process after you go through June.
Aren't
But
we
he went
all,
out,
Brian?
yeah. I mean, he went out to Oregon on an unofficial visit. I think it was in late May, and then he took officials to Bama, Michigan State, and Miami. Blair, those officials are fun, and the kids get loved up and all that stuff, but they are exhausting. Just from you're not getting a ton of sleep. Nobody's getting their 8 hours on official visits every night, and then you're always on because you're trying to absorb everything, whether it's talking with players, meeting with coaches, looking at campus, understanding the academics. And Samson goes to Thayer Academy, which is a really good school, and so academics are something that he's paying close attention to. I just think if he makes the decision in the summer, it's because he saw what he needed to see. Um, and it's time to move forward. I mean, he talked about Oklahoma still being in contact a little bit, and in theory, because of when Thayer starts its season, he could get there in early September on an official visit if he wanted to, or any of the other schools that he wanted to go check out. But more so than not being able to make visits, I just think, man, we're talking about doing this for another 3, 4 months. That can wear on you, and knowing that you can rest and relax is pretty enticing to some of these kids.
And he does have a brother playing college football, so he's familiar with the process. He understands how this is going to play out in the next few months. You mentioned some schools at the top there: Bama, Miami, Oregon. Some schools he's already taken official visits to. What's resonating with him when you consider some of ththese front runners?
Well, I think first and foremost, his relationships with the coaching staff and the offensive line coach, like Michigan State, Chris Kaplovic, he's done a great job recruiting for years in the Northeast, and there's a relationship there. I talked to Samson. How much does NIL factor into this? And he did not give me the "it doesn't mean anything" line. Which was refreshing, but he did say that it's not going to play a huge role because he needs to go somewhere where he can develop, where look, we have him rated really high, which thinks we think he's an NFL guy, so he could make a lot of money down the road, and I think he will look at that as well. But I think it's going to be offensive line coach, how much the offensive line coach can develop him, and how comfortable he is at the school. I know in talking to a lot of people after he made all his visits, Miami's doing a really good job with him, and I think they're a school to really keep an eye on with him.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here, Brian. You're a soccer guy. Penalty spot. What's your gut telling you about what we could expect out of Samson Okunlola here in the next few months? Do you feel like he will make a decision early?
I think he will. I think because he was able to get out and see some schools. And, he told me that other than the 4 I mentioned, Oklahoma, would then be the fifth. That's who he was speaking with. So it's not, and he's speaking with some others here and there, but it's not like he's having intense discussions with 15 schools or 10 schools. So he's got to get out and see these other schools. I think, to me, he's starting to narrow things down more in his mind, other than his top 9 that he put out in early June. And I think, for me, you could just sense that, okay, I'm ready to kind of make a decision and get back to being a kid for a little bit.
5-star offensive tackle Samson Okunlola continuing to navigate through the recruiting process, and it could be closing in on a finish there for the top uncommitted prospect at his position in the country. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Blair.
All right, for national recruiting analyst Brian Dohn and our producer Lance Glynn, I am Blair Angulo. Thank you so much for listening to this 5-minute morning edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast.